he is alive. So that completely rejuvenates, you know, why we're sitting here. Especially with all them stupid does yesterday, like, that excites me now.
Ready?
Over the past few years, we've been extremely fortunate to harvest some incredible whitetail bucks in the deep forests of northern Alberta. But for myself personally, the last whitetail I was able to hang my tag on was a heavy old drop tine buck back in November of 2019. Since then, we've had some incredible deer on our covert trail cameras, but one particular buck has demanded my attention since the start of 2020. He lived not far from where I killed my drop tine deer, and the first pictures I got of him were as a young 3-year-old. He was a great deer with a nice frame and a split G2 on his left antler. But if I'm being honest, he wasn't a deer I was particularly interested in watching, as I didn't think he had much potential to be anything special. But after the first card pull of 2020, I was shocked to see how much he had grown and the number of points he had added to his frame. And although I knew he was still a young deer, the bush where he lived is an unforgiving place to make a living as a deer, and I knew the odds of him making it another year were unlikely. So I made the decision early that I would focus my time in his core area and make quick work out of harvesting him. You see, this is the first mistake that I made in this journey. Based on all my years of hunting whitetail in the bush, I've worked out an elaborate algorithm that uses the number of trail camera pics in a certain area of a certain deer to determine what the likelihood is of killing that particular deer. And based off of the constant photos I was getting of this buck in such a small area, my best guess was that it would take me less than a week to kill him, and then we would go back to chasing the other old bucks running around the rest of the bush. To this day, I can't tell you what made this deer different, but he didn't follow the rules, and he certainly didn't make it easy. I'm calling for a heck of a storm here today. And it was actually snowing on the way up, but it's since stopped. Pretty good sign. A lot of tracks on the line coming in overnight. And even a few more into the stand here, so. I'm not convinced that I'm in the right spot. So it's a struggle sitting here. We got pictures of that buck. I actually came in yesterday to move these stands over to where we'd been getting pictures of him so far this year. And I came in and I hadn't had any pictures of him over there in the last week. And instead, those cameras are straight to the north of us. And instead, I had a bunch of pictures of him now to the south of us, 600 yards. And daytime pictures. So I had a picture of him the 6th, picture of him the 7th over there, and then a video of him on the 9th here. And we're literally in a direct route in between where these cameras are. And I mean, he's getting in between somewhere. So we're basically set up where we can see the best. It's such thick bush in here. If he was at any of our other spots, I'd feel so much better about it, but the fact that he's here makes him tough to hunt. But we gotta just try and spend the time.
Fatal Impact is proudly sponsored by Covert Scouting Cameras, Vortex Optics, Old Smokes Coffee, Top Notch Taxidermy Studio, and the MD of Bonnieville.
This segment of the show is brought to you by Deluxe Wall Tents, built in Canada for Canadian conditions.
Darcy, my good friend Daniel, and myself would spend every minute we could sitting for this deer throughout the month of November. We moved stands constantly and ran an entire trapline of covert trail cameras trying to keep tabs on him. By the middle of the month, he had driven me insane. It didn't add up. The amount of photos in such a small area made it seem almost impossible that I had yet to lay my eyes on him. Other bucks that I only had one photo of, I would see 2 or 3 times throughout the month. Yet the one buck that was the most active in the entire area was an absolute ghost in real life. It went against everything I knew as a bush hunter.
Oh, it is a cold one this morning. Like -19, it says in the wood meat truck. But, so we're changing it up. Daniel and I got out of the stand yesterday and actually went for a big hike. And I think we found the spot that we've been looking for the past 2 weeks now. We've been hunting this giant old non-typical split buck for 6 or 7 days now, sitting in these stands that every day I was there, it just didn't feel like it was the right spot. We weren't seeing the deer, we weren't seeing the deer sign that we needed, and everywhere we were getting pictures of them on the covert camera was unhuntable. And I knew that there had to be a spot somewhere in this pocket that was congregating deer. And Daniel and I actually went, and I'm pretty sure we found it. And so we went home yesterday, and we're gonna be sitting in a ground blind today. And so that's why I just went in with the ground blind, the chairs, the tripod, shooting sticks, everything that we kind of needed. And now we're gonna throw the rest of our gear on. We're gonna quad in there, and then we're gonna make 2 or 3 trips into this spot, set up the ground blind, set up the decoy. I actually got the big boss buck decoy that we're gonna set out in the bottom of this flat. And it's either gonna work great or it's gonna work against us. We'll know after the first couple deer and we'll adjust accordingly. But for the first time, I'm genuinely excited about where we're gonna be sitting for this particular deer. And I think we stand a realistic chance. So we're here a little bit extra early. We're gonna get everything in there, hike it in, get set up in the dark, and then watch the sun rise overlooking a brand new patch of timber and a big wide open clearing with 2 big scrape lines running the edge of it. It's the creek and decoy standing out in the middle. And I think we're gonna be in for some action today, so fingers are crossed. But I am cold just after that one short little quad ride, so let's throw the rest of our gear on here and let's get in there before the sun comes up and try to get set up in the dark and watch it rise from the beautiful new little ground blind that we bought. So loudest decoy you can possibly buy. It's just after 10 o'clock. We had that one buck come in. Did exactly what we wanted him to do. I actually thought old Ezekiel was gonna get pushed into a pile of parts again. But we spent majority of the month bouncing between stands and that ground blind along the creek, without as much as a glimpse of the deer I was after. As the season wound down, we slammed up stands in one last spot to try and ride it out until the end, hoping that we would finally get lucky. Immediately, we started seeing more activity, including some larger bucks that we hadn't seen yet. How cool is that buck? That's a deer that I'm pretty sure anyways, it's the deer that we called Gimpy. And normally he's got one giant antler, and then the other one is like a weird, heavy, short 3-point type thing. Biggest bodied deer that I have on camera this year in here. And he come in, gave us quite the show. The fact that he broke that one off kind of intrigues me, but it also kind of worries me because the only deer that I can think of that's big enough in here to give him a run for his money is the one that we're after. And boy, if that thing broke off,
that antler, I would hate to see how many points that big one is missing, because he's got a lot of skinny inlines and a lot of weird points in weird places that wouldn't take much to break off. So
My fears became reality when the next time I checked my covert trail cameras. Sure enough, the videos showed that he had broken off several points on his left antler. I can't say for sure if it was from a fight with that particular buck, but either way, he was pretty beat up. It was disappointing, but didn't change my plans for trying to hunt him. I had invested my entire season into sitting for this one particular deer, and I would ride it out to the bitter end if I had to, in hopes of just laying eyes on him once.
Fatal Impact is proudly sponsored by Wood Wheaton Super Center, True Fire Releases, Victory Archery, Black Widow Innovations, Wapiti River Outdoors, and Federal Premium Ammunition.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the MD of Bonnyville. Lake adventures happen here.
As the sun set for the last time that season, I put my tail between my legs and went home defeated. I started sitting on the 4th of November and sat for 21 full days during that month. The few days I wasn't in the stand, I was moving stands around, checking cameras, and trying to put the pieces together to finally outsmart them. But the hardest part for me to swallow was that after spending the entire month obsessing over this one deer, I didn't feel like I was any closer to killing him than before I started. Heading into next year, I didn't know what to change, and I didn't know where to set up to hunt him. I'll admit that a small part of me had hoped he wouldn't show up next fall, so that I wouldn't have to stress over figuring him out. For the first time in my whitetail hunting career, I was at a complete loss. But after checking cameras for the first time in late October, sure enough, there he was. Bigger, heavier, older, and 1 year smarter. I didn't like my odds, but there I was, refreshed and ready to take on the challenge for another month if I had to.
we are trying something we've never tried before. We've been sitting this line because that's where these big deer are crossing. But there's this low muskeg spot where there's not a lot of deer movement, but then there's 2 ridges on either side, and both of those ridges are where the deer cross. So we've actually come into the bottom. We brought 2 stands, tripods, but we don't have the legs for them because we only need just like 6 foot of elevation. And we're able to sit down on the bottom, and now we've got the 2 ridges. One's about 200 and the other one's about 250. We're in the middle of them, far enough away where they shouldn't bust before they come on the line. And I think we're in a really better spot. I just don't know how this is gonna work. It's gonna be a bit of a rodeo, but
I couldn't have described it better when I said that it was going to be a rodeo.
other side quick.
Daniel and I would spend the next 8 days straight sitting in these stands, watching bucks rip across the line, barely standing long enough for a shot if we wanted to. On the second day, Daniel managed to get a shot at one of the bucks we were after. Unfortunately, it happened so quick that I thought I was recording, but wasn't.
This is the buck I said I was gonna kill. Yesterday we saw him twice. Didn't get a shot at him either time. So he stepped out on the line and we did the old camera swap. Dana said shoot him. That is what I did. I'm pretty happy to be having my hands on this guy, because this is the buck that evaded us twice yesterday. So
Yeah, he's a good buck.
he's nice and heavy. Main beam's over here and then he just kind of peters out, but you know me. I'm here to fill the freezer, and I like the character bucks.
After 8 days of sitting in those stands, we had seen a ton of bucks. Without a trail camera picture of my target buck for almost 2 weeks now, I'll admit that we were getting complacent when I glanced up and caught a glimpse of a deer turn and jump off the line 100 yards in front of me. I never thought anything of it until I checked the covert 2 days later, and the video showed the deer I was after 40 yards from the cut line and walking straight towards it. The trail he was on would lead him to exactly where I saw that deer turn and run.
Even the timing lined up. It was a final slap in the face and the ultimate gut punch, as I had now spent nearly 30 days in the stand waiting for my one opportunity, and we blew it. I knew he wouldn't make the same mistake twice, and the recent flurry of pictures further to the south made me rethink my strategy. So we set up a few stands and committed to sitting down there until the bitter end.
Fatal Impact is proudly sponsored by Mad Ramps, Scree Gear, High Mountain Seasonings, Block Targets, iHunter, Glendale Targets, and Deluxe Wall Tents. This segment of Fatal Impact is brought to you by Tourism Saskatchewan.
This segment of the show is brought to you by Wood Wheaton Supercenter, a proud supporter of our outdoor heritage.
After spending 7 days in this spot, I felt confident that we were in the right location. We were seeing bucks cruising and getting photos of them crossing the line overnight. With only a few days left in the season, I headed into the stand by myself and got set up for the day. Shortly into the morning, I caught movement behind me and saw the tail end of a deer walk over the hill. I turned towards it, grabbed my rattling antlers, and quickly tried to coax it back for a look. After rattling for a minute or so, I accepted defeat and slowly turned back to where I would normally watch. And there, down in the bottom, stood a deer looking straight through me, with my rattling antlers still in my hands.
I just shot it here. And I am 80% sure that that is the deer I've sat for 42 days. Oh my God. Oh man, I hope it's him. It's gotta be him. There's no other deer that look like that in this part of the bush. And I always said, when I see him, I'll know. And when I put that vortex scope on him for the very first time, my mind was made up. That deer was gonna die. So if it's not him, that's my fault. But I don't see how it couldn't be. Now where is he at? He's over there. It's him. That is the deer that I have spent 41 full days sitting in this bush for. Today was number 42. Look at that antler. Oh my God. I mean, I'm sure you guys can see it, but he's just a towering row of tines, and that's kind of how I've known him ever since I got the first photo of him. And then this year he showed back up. We knew it was going to be an incredible growing season. The deer in the bush had a great year, great winter, and when I got the first covert trail camera photo of him, it was immediately apparent that he was a special deer. And he put the mass on that we always thought he would. The tine length was still there, and most importantly, he was alive. And so I knew that it was him and I again this year. And for the second year in a row, I actually was ready to concede defeat. I thought that he was going to beat me. Thought he was going to win. Going into the season, I felt like I had good odds. I was getting some pretty good daylight photos of him. But he was so tricky. And we had an opportunity on the 14th, Daniel and I, sitting on the line on the rodeo grounds. And
he busted us. We got complacent. We were talking. And I didn't know if we were going to get another opportunity. It's a special moment. And actually the last daylight photo I have of him is on the 17th, right underneath of this tree stand. So I knew when we set those stands up that morning, for the first time in, at that point, 35 days of hunting him, that was the first time where I felt like we might actually be in a position where we could maybe kill him. We had stuck to our number one rule, and that's basically you sit in a stand. If you know he's been there, you know he's going to come back, and you sit there, and right when you think that you need to move, right when you're ready to give up on that particular location, you sit there a couple more days, because it's always come back to bite us. And that's exactly what we did on this deer, and it paid off.